What do you want? What do you want? Why do you keep touching me? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Why do you keep touching me? Welcome to the world of Warcraft.
Hey, how's everyone doing tonight? I'm alive, and I thought I can take a look at the whole indictment. Let me know if you can hear me or not. I'm using a different mic setup. Will we fix things? Okay, let's begin. The Justice Department unveiled an indictment on Friday charging former President Donald J. Trump with 37 criminal counts. They relate Mr. Trump's hoarding of sensitive information after his office and refusal to return them. So there are 31 counts related to holding national defense information, 5 counts related to concealing possession of classified documents, and 2 false statements. Thank you, Palm Dad. United States of America versus Donald J. Trump and Waltine Naughton. Might have pronounced that wrong. The grand jury charges that at times material to this indictment on or about the dates approximate times stated below, defendant Donald J. Trump was the 45th President of the United States of America. He held the office from the 20th of January 2017 to 20 January 2021. As President, Trump had lawful access to the most sensitive classified documents and national defense information gathered and owned by the United States government. So this is going to state that Trump had a period of time when he had access to the documents legally. And if you recall, he did not handle those things well. Over the course of his presidency, Trump gathered newspapers, clippings, letters, notes, cards, photographs, official documents, and other materials in cardboard boxes that he kept in the White House. Among the materials, Trump stored hundreds of classified documents. Classified documents Trump stored in his boxes. This is good. Regarding defense and weapons capabilities of both the United States and foreign countries, United States nuclear programs, potential vulnerabilities of the United States and its allies to military attack. Why would he have those things? Plans for possible retaliation in response to a foreign attack. Also, why would he have those things? The unauthorized disclosure of these classified documents could put at risk the national security of the United States and foreign relations, which we know he did. More to the point, I think he did this so that he has an insurance policy. There's no other reason to do it unless he's like a magpie collecting things. On the 20th of January, he ceased to be president. He caused scores of boxes which would contain classified documents to be taken to Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida. He was not authorized to have those documents. He maintained it as an active social club. Tens of thousands of people filtered in and out of a place of unsecured documents. On 2 occasions in 2021, he showed classified documents in July. Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey. The writer published in 2 members of his staff, none of whom possessed security clearance. Trump showed the described plan of attack that Trump said was prepared from the Department of Defense and senior military officials. The plan was highly confidential and secret. Trump also said, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, but this is still a secret. Oh, you're screwed, buddy. You are screwed. You're on tape. Representative of Political Action Committee. Oh, Jesus Christ. Did not possess a security clearance classified. Not related to a military operation, told the representative. So he basically showed them off his trophies of his political action committee. You're also not supposed to coordinate with political action committees, which someone else might want to take up. On the 30th of March last year, the FBI opens up an investigation into the retention of the unlawful documents. Trump endeavored to obstruct the FBI and grand jury action. His attorney falsely represented. So he tried to throw his attorney under the bus. Told someone to hide the documents. Suggested that his attorney destroy them. Gave some of the documents, walked away and was cooperating fully. On 17 January, he provided 15 boxes containing 107 documents, classified markings. Okay. On 3 June, in response to grand jury subpoena demanding production of all documents, 38 more documents, classified markings. On August 8th, search warrant the FBI seized a further 102 documents of classification markings. Oh, yes, I did hear about his lawyers quitting on him. Probably because, well, like we talking about a little bit up here, his lawyers get thrown under the bus. So why would you work for that guy if he's just gonna basically screw you? More to the point, he's probably gonna screw you to the effect that he's going to jail anyway. I mean, this is, I think, obstruction of justice is a pretty significant charge to begin with. They're outlined further down in the indictment. Take a look. Defendant now, too, was a member of the United States Navy stationed as a valet in the White House during Trump's presidency. Let's see how this played out. New York Post. So he was not a Navy. No, I don't want a BDC account. His first name is Waltine. Enlisted in the Navy in 2001, so ascended the rank of Senior Chief Culinary Specialist. Okay, so he enlisted, and he was a cook. Of course, he was a cook. It's always the goddamn cook. Mar-a-Lago includes 25 guest rooms, 2 ballrooms, spa, a gift store, exercise facilities, office space, and an outdoor pool and patio. Why would you need an exercise or a gift store for a place that has $10,000 cover charge? $150 social events. And these boxes were just stacked in I swear to God, a bathroom or a locker. Secret Service was not responsible for protection of Trump's boxes or contents. He did not inform the Secret Service. Maybe. I don't know if they can prove it, but I'm not entirely certain that would have to be the case. Zone by, produced for. It's government. So Executive Order 12/9/58. See amendment. It's amended by 13/292 in 2003 and 13/526 in 2009. Top secret, secret, or confidential. Yeah. So security clearance kind of works for normal people in this sort of bifurcated way. Information classified as top secret, if it could, be expected to cause exceptionally grave damage to national security. Secret, if it's maybe going to cause some damage. And confidential is the lowest grade of security clearance. Yeah, and then there's one for not to be sent to foreign nationals. So sensitive compartment information is a separate classification, so it'll be top secret SCI. This means that the information can only be viewed in a room. It has to be controlled in a room that is specifically designed for its viewing, that is secure against eavesdropping of any nature, and that the information cannot be brought in or out of that room. It has to be properly handled. This is an extra appendation to a security clearance. And you're not supposed to know about these things unless you are directly involved in the execution of something that requires knowing that information, which is that whole, I can tell you, but I'd have to, terms of service you. I'm not going to read that in detail because I just explained it in 5 seconds. Board of Duties received intelligence briefings from high-level government agencies, Central Intelligence Agency, Chairman and Director of Staff, blah, blah, blah. President's Daily Brief. United States. Kept things from the Central Intelligence Agency, the Department of Defense, the NSA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which I think does satellites information. Yeah. The National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO. Yeah, they launched the satellites. So you have one department for reading it and one department for launching it. Department of Energy, which handles all of our nuclear weapons. Department of State and Bureau of Intelligence and Research, DSBIR. Yeah, they are the intelligence arm of the State Department. This is just rubbing salt in the wound. In my administration, will enforce all laws concerning the protection of classified information. No one will be above the law. As head of the executive branch and commander-in-chief, I have a unique constitutional responsibility to protect the nation's classified information, including by controlling access to it. More broadly, the issue of security clearance raises questions about the practice of former officials maintain. This is when he was removing security clearance from generals who had been critical of him, retired generals who have been critical of him. One of them was, I think, former head of the CIA. So OBS is going to do that thing tonight. Have transferred to private life into highly partisan positions and seek to use real or perceived access to sensitive information to validate their political attacks. Any access granted should be in furtherance of national, not personal interests. He's so screwed. From 15 March 2021, some of Trump's boxes were stored in the Mar-a-Lago Club's white and gold ballroom, in which events and gatherings take place. The boxes were stacked for a limited time on a ballroom stage, as depicted in the photograph below. Classy. Would you like to have your wedding here, guys? With all these boxes sitting on the stage? I guess you could throw a tarp over it or something. Now to move some of the boxes from the white and gold ballroom. And here they are storing classified documents in the shower. Why is there a chandelier in the shower? Directed the storage room on the ground floor be cleaned out so that it could store his boxes. Oh, good. So it's not in a high traffic area at all. The liquor supply comes at the linen room, the lock shop, and various other rooms. So, like, everyone who is going to be, like, doing things, like hotel workers are going to be going in here and pass this room all the time. On June 24th, 2021, Trump boxes like room moved to the storage room. After the move, there were more than 80 boxes in the storage room as depicted in the photograph below. Well, at least they've stacked neatly. It's a very nice looking Tetris stack. Several of those boxes had spilled onto the floor. Trump's disclosure of classified information in private meetings. Yeah. On July 21, 2021, no longer president, gave an office interview in the Bedminster Club. We read about this one before. Upon greeting the writer, publisher, and his two staff members, Trump stated, "Look what I found." The senior military read it and showed it. It's interesting. Used to have access to sensitive information. Locked if not directly looking at it, and shred it when done with the documents. Yeah. Sometimes companies aren't great about this, but usually they are pretty effective. Hi, Titan, Uranus, thank you much. Here, this is also really interesting. See, as president, I could have declassified it, which means that he is a publicly recorded admitting that he knows he isn't president. Uranus is in the 5th house temporarily. So, like, that's bad on several levels, right? Like, he's toast. They're going to run that over and over and over again. Beginning of May 2021. So Trump decided to collect and look over his documents. Let's go look at the indictments, because that's the juicy part. When you have battery back, Titan, you have to send me some of these memes. I've been looking at Ukraine stuff all day. January 2021. These are the documents in question, which are quite extensive. Purpose of conspiracy for Trump to keep classified documents. He's taken them and hide and concealed them from a federal grand jury. Means and manner of conspiracy. There's probably more people involved in this conspiracy, honestly, than just Waltine. Waltine, by the way, is the most interesting first name I've ever seen in my life. Each one of these contains like multiple year sentences. Multiple year sentences. Counts 1 through 31, willful retention of national defense information. So each one can carry up to 10 years, which is enough to put Trump in prison for the rest of his life. Just one of them. Count 32, conspiracy to obstruct justice. Over 20 years, up to 20 years. Withholding a document or record. Corruptly concealing a document or record. Concealing a document in federal investigation. scheme to conceal. Do we really need Donald Trump? We can send him away. It's allowed. He is screwed. James Trusty and John Raleigh left the former president's defense team as he faces the most serious legal threat of his career. James Trusty and John Raleigh, in a state of chaos and confusion. A 37-count indictment filed in Miami accusing him of illegally retaining documents after he left office, but some of the country's most sensitive national security secrets, and of engaging in a conspiracy with an aide to obstruct the government's repeated efforts to retrieve them. Mr. Trump announced the departure of Mr. Trusty and Mr. Raleigh in a post on Friday on his social media platform, Truth Social. He said he would be represented by a new lawyer, Todd Blanche, who must be the dumbest man in America. I want to thank Jim, Trusty, and John Raleigh for their work, but they're up against a very dishonest, corrupt, evil, and sick group of people, the likes of which have not been seen before. Yes, those people were the Trump camp. They were hindered at every step of the way by Donald Trump himself. It has been an honor to have spent the last year defending him, they wrote, and we know he will be vindicated. Well, that's very loyal of them. Their departure came a month after the resignation of a third lawyer, Timothy Parlatore. Days after he stepped back from representing the former president, Mr. Parlatore appeared on CNN to complain about how another lawyer close to Trump, Boris Fishstein, had created conflict in the legal team. Mr. Blanche is set to accompany Trump to Acirema in Miami on Tuesday, and it's unclear whether other lawyers are also to be with them. Trump is expected to start interviewing new lawyers in Florida on Monday, according to a person with knowledge of the plans who was not authorized to discuss them. As recently as Thursday night, less than 2 hours after the former president's legal team was briefed on his indictment, Mr. Trump was on CNN. Mr. Trusty was on CNN denouncing the case against him. In the past, several Trump lawyers have complained that Mr. Fishstein has delivered only positive news to the former president and avoided bringing him bad news. In their statement, Mr. Trusty and Mr. Raleigh said the case has shifted to Florida made a logical moment for us to step aside and let others carry the cases through to completion. Yeah, these lawyers probably want to get paid in advance. Isn't Rudy Giuliani still trying to get paid by Trump? No, we can't put that on what you call it. Get copyright for sure. Let me check this real quick. I don't want to let it go too long on the theme, or we'll definitely pull copyright on us. That's brutal. Appearing on CNN on Friday after the indictment was unsealed, Mr. Parlator said of the departure of Mr. Raleigh and Mr. Trusty. It's surprising, and yet at the same time unsurprising. It's a difficult situation to be in. Yes, your highest profile copyright, or your highest profile client, that might be short enough. Your highest profile client is just about to go into prison for the rest of his life. Have a good night, Titan. Okay. Take this. I want to shoot a massive hyperlink at you guys if you want to read along. We're going to move into the next segment. Okay, this is the other bit we're doing this evening. A friend of mine from college went and got herself a PhD. She is the author of this particular paper, which got published not too long ago, May 31st. It is and we're going to butcher these names horribly, and you'll see why in a little bit. I wanted to read through it and put it out to you guys. It is a very it's a very well written essay. The format of this essay is positing a world in which anthropology has been abolished as a practice, and that these is a set of historians who are looking at recovered anthropology field notes from an individual's time spent in a foreign country, and in doing so, it is designed like it's not in the way, it's not clever in the way that like it's deeply complex and clever type thing. It's clever in the sort of ways you're very easily going to see what is happening, and you're gonna be like, I see what you did there, and you'll start to understand what the point of this is, like the commentary. It's designed to take you out of the equation just enough so that you recognize the familiarity of it all and maybe look at it from an outsider's perspective. So that is kind of what we're going to be doing here. So the Professor Hilary Morgan Letham is the author of this. And I talked to her beforehand, so she's quite excited that we'll be looking at this today. By the way, someone remember to timestamp this for me, please, so that I can send it just this part over. Because otherwise it's going to be a long one. Dr. Thomas Takagawa, Department of History, University of Tokyo, 7 Comb 3-1 Hongo, Tokyo 113-8654, Japan. Dear Dr. Takawaka, I'm going to mess everything up tonight. I hope this finds you very well. After the complete elimination of anthropology from universities across the globe, followed by the utter collapse of academic institutions in the former United States of America, I'm endlessly, 18 July 2101. I'm endlessly anxious about even the future of our own discipline, the history of science given its political tones and possible implications. But never mind this, let's try to live in the present rather than the past, despite the historian's task. I was conducting archival research on my latest trip to Chicago. Ill-advised, I might add, in the dead of February. Yes, it is. As both me and Professor Latham went to school in Chicago quite extensively. We are very familiar with the Chicago winter. I came across this curious collection of papers that an anonymous anthropologist drafted in the late 2010s and early 2020s, entitled Returned to Acirema, Fragments Regarding the 21st Century Nesameric Culture. Is clearly meant to riff off of the 20th century anthropologist Horace Miner's 1956 essay, Body Ritual Among the... You can read it. As we both know, Miner's essay was renowned for the ways it turned the ethnographic gaze inward upon American society, making the familiar strange and the strange familiar. For the better part of the late 20th century, Miner's essay became a canonical text in college classrooms, demonstrating cultural relativism by applying terms reserved for the other to the American people. We don't see the systemic problematizing of the other until e.g. James Clifford and George Marcus's 1986 Writing Culture, or Mikhail Roth-Truett's article on the savage slot in the 1980s and early 1990s. But what I wish to meditate on here is why it is that Miner's essay would spark a series of reappraisals or reiterations. What does that, or what did it, attempt to accomplish? Moreover, why is it that we feel, as historians of this now extinct discipline, that Miner's essay worked, and what I found in the archive and have enclosed below for your perusal doesn't? Sure, the papers are ethnographic field notes, even if fragmented, preferred stylistic form beloved by anthropologists, and they paint quite successfully a picture of a decaying society on the edge of some kind of violent rupture. The methodology remains the same as Miner's, but the inclination is distinct. The anthropologist of the late 2010s and early 2020s wants to critique the society, the country that they've loved and left, so they practice that self-induced estrangement that is hallmark of the anthropological knowledge, thanks to Boas, Malachowski, and others. Yet, this fails to be adequate, it seems. This account becomes agonizing, or rather the anthropologist succumbs to the agony, rather than pulling off the satire Miner managed in the 1950s. I cannot recall if there was an effective turn in anthropology. This is more your expertise than mine, but maybe this is about emotion. Please do me the favor of following my footnotes, of journeying with me as we attempt to decipher this artifact together, speculating collaboratively on what it's meant to convey. It's what the anthropologist would have wanted. All my best. Rose Nepater. Yes. 54 Rapesel 75006 Paris, France. Document pending. Nearly 65 years have passed since an anthropologist ventured off to explore the body rituals of the Acirema, people who until that moment many suspected stood separate from most of the world. He revealed were just prone to what anthropology happily calls magical thinking, as other communities across the globe. This makes the Acirema a knack for exceptionalism all the more toxic and befuddling. These are fearful people, preoccupied with multiple notions of purity, and I do mean social demarcations that result in vicious racism, who harbor beliefs in witchcraft whether they actively realize it or not. Despite priding themselves on their high level of social and economic development relative to the rest of the world in 1956, scientific inquiry was stifled by a number of equally conservative rulers whose influence became particularly virulent from the 1970s onward. This divestment from science and education remains. And while the landmass we call Acirema has been previously politically stable, a purported stronghold of democracy, the territory stolen from the indigenous peoples, by the way, was on the cusp of a number of social movements in the late 1950s where the marginalized, particularly ones from the African diaspora, fought for basic civil rights. There is a distinct and palpable rot at the core of society, and is most evident in the steady rise of collectivism. I'm not even trying to pronounce the things, but if you read it, you'll notice that they are simply us spelled backwards. And is most evident in the steady rise of collective resentment among the peasants, rural folk, who seek to quite dangerously marry religion with politics and elect a divine king as ruler. The divine king bears similarities to the classic Mayan and ancient Egyptian notions of worship, which posit that their king is sent from the gods, a deity in and of himself, imbued with supernatural qualities. It becomes nearly impossible to ever depose of this ruler or critically assess his capacity to govern. Aside from the ascent of fundamentalist political regime and the stripping of basic human rights, those who often dwell in large cities and possess diverse identities and ancestral spirits live precariously. Many await police brutality and are murdered directly by state officials or indirectly by inadequate and unstable social, economic, and political institutions. They are markedly different from those described long ago. There is no doubt in my mind that the gap between then and now only continue to widen. The elders do not recognize their children, and likewise the children do not recognize and in fact despise their elders. For good reason, I would say too. There is little evidence that their quality of life can be improved without sustained warfare at home rather than abroad, as was once the case. Is it too soon to say that the bonds essential to creating and sustaining a society have eroded in this land? To the north, Adenak, another stolen territory, condemns the way of life, and to the south, yet a third stolen territory waits nervously for the looming military invasion. After all, the driving factor behind all these crumbling institutions, systems, and structures is an unchecked neoliberal system, capitalism, which places things before people. With their values entirely misplaced, they struggle to make sense of their brave new world. A set of observations appear below from my field notes. Forgive me for their brevity and distance. 18 September 2018. Industrial rot. That's what's all around me. Perhaps we can say development came and left swiftly. The abundant corn and soy fields are littered with abandoned barns, silos, and the steel skeletons of elementary agricultural machinery, which is over-reliant on chemicals to keep pests at bay. This demonstrates a major miscalculation, a misunderstanding of the science in this population. Agricultural workers, farmers, and others exposed to these methods are poisoned and suffer from cancer and other illnesses. It can be said that people here relate to ecology in a destructive manner. They do not comprehend and are, in fact, deeply hostile to alternatives for preserving fragile ecosystems. Fragment 2, October 22nd, 2018. The avocado is an endangered fruit here. Elders assert that the avocado is a source of social and economic ill, sapping potential wealth from their children, especially when combined with toasted bread. 17 November 2018. The bee is also in danger. Without the bee, how will they survive and the world more broadly sustain itself? The fragile ecosystems will collapse if this abuse of science continues. Clearly, the issue is that business entities are immune from the rule of law. I reckon that the social institutions underpinning this society require reimaginings, but the atmosphere here is allergic to critical thinking. 12 March 2019. Driving along the heartland, I noticed that aside from industrial rot, and dilapidated and abandoned buildings, there are innumerable glossy modern edifices, which resemble eerily warehouses and factories. A local farmer tells me that these warehouses are sacred places of worship. I am struck by the ways they have gravitated towards these unremarkable, nearly careless box-like constructions, rising from the flat, yellow, desolate landscape of pimples These holy box factories attract hordes who pay homage to their deity, Zeus, on the designated holy day of Yadnis. That one I could pronounce. It seems that the religion of many of the settlers brought with them is transformed, even radicalized in puzzling ways. Sure, their missionary work of incessant proselytization endures, but with a fresh set of insidious ramifications. Instead, misplacing their trust in the sacred text purportedly sent from the heavens, they turn to a single charismatic man who interprets the text for them, hampering the development of critical thinking skills. This man, only rarely is a woman, tells this segment of society exactly what to think and attempts to define morality. Amid calls for love and acceptance, their leader expounds hatred by inciting fear of the other. In this case, those who, for the most part, do not look like the Ewat settlers. Occasionally, during rituals, these holy boxes' neglected fervor of dancing and singing results in them uttering curious words that do not belong to any language I have ever encountered. Their charismatic leader heartily describes these episodes, which is very much similar to spirit possession or epileptic seizures, as the words of Seizu. Yet how does he know with the words of Seizu if this deity lived more than 2,000 years ago? While they seem to be more connected than ever to their main deity, this has not resulted in any kind of social progress or economic security. Their Yadnis rituals of congregating in the holy box factories, dancing and singing, as well as abiding by the number of spiritual holidays, does not deliver concrete results. It would appear that either the deity is difficult to appease or is outright abandoned. Perhaps the deity never existed, or his father, Dog, the head of this cosmological pantheon, is angry. I don't have any ideas regarding how to correct this relationship, so for the time being, they will remain in the hot pursuit of these failed rituals. Dry mouth, bad. I seem to spend in 20 April 2019. I seem to spend an inordinate amount of time in the heartland, but this is because it is the epicenter of unhappiness, the source, if you will, of the societal destabilization. The people feel hard done by, and maybe it's true that they've been abandoned by their government. I found out that their plant life, cotton and corn seeds, for example, are patented, unless the agriculturalists present a large sum of money so they can indulge in organic farming practices, which simply resemble conventional agricultural practices over the course of humanity's existence up till now. They must enter into an uncomfortable argument with Anatsanam. Yeah. The corporate entity leaves the agriculturalist indebted, poisoned, and ultimately dead. It is sucking the souls of those who endeavor to sustain society. I have never seen this level of toxicity in a society. I conducted research in France, Cuba, Peru, and Kenya. It's a stylistic question I should have asked. Why is France, Cuba, Peru, and Kenya spelled forward? Acirema possesses a multi-tiered education system at the elementary and secondary levels, as well as the post-secondary. Among the many tiers are community colleges, public or flagship universities, liberal arts colleges, and the Association of the Vines, of privately endowed universities. The first two, community colleges and public universities, serve the poor or anemic working class. Community colleges are stigmatized as cesspools of poorly performing high school graduates and unable to score high enough on standardized tests, while public universities are viewed as perfunctory spaces of education for most of the population. In fact, public universities are glorified in cinema through the prism of sex. Most films about the college experience highlight rituals of drinking and lust. And while the cost to attend these public universities may be nearly equivalent to that of the highly desirable liberal arts colleges and Association of Vines, the education offers no guarantee of success. Education here acts as another kind of pedigree, as part of the biography. It determines and shapes their opportunities in the future. If the individual can afford to pay nearly $100,000 a year, they can secure for themselves a better future, and in that instance perhaps climb the illustrious social ladder. Yet the reality remains, from what I observe, that education is segmented so only few can afford it. Most of the population borrows an enormous amount of money and remains in debt for most of their adulthood, paying nearly a third to a half of their money earnings back to a government that does not provide any social services. Keeping them indebted would seem to be a way to prevent societal uprisings, and thus become a mode by which those in power can remain in power. There's something rather insidious about this system. So in other words, much like every social institution in this land, the education is structured by the desire to create social economic asymmetry and solidify a stratified society which the illusion of progress perpetually haunts the living and calculates in them the spirit of capitalism. There are a people who often quite willingly work more than nearly any other comparable developed country for a third of the pay without any basic social nets or vacations. Unlike previous generations, those born after 1980 are not upwardly mobile. Another phantom then haunting their society is the notion that there is social mobility. The reality, one resident told me, is that they will never move up into social and economic class, and that the middle class is nearly absent. Yesterday, I took a bus from a state called Iowa to the city of Ogakchik. The bus broke down in the middle of a cornfield 3 hours south after hitting a pothole when a herd of cattle suddenly stormed across the highway, startling the bus driver. Unlike the rest of the world, the public transit is underdeveloped. If I were to ever so unkindly invoke the work of the 19th century anthropologist Lewis Henry Morgan, I would say that this particular dimension of culture stopped being developed in the 1950s and could be classified as being nearly barbaric, a low level of civilization, to poke fun at a colonist term that originally designated to denote societies that included myriad social institutions, such as a writing system, law, religion, education, and warfare. Anyway, to journey the same distance in Europe would take 3 hours by high-speed rail, and rather than nearly 9 hours on a decaying bus. I wonder how much of this society's life is wasted sitting on this emaciated public transit. When I arrived, I once again set my heart on testing transportation. To my dismay, significant portions of the notorious L train had been shut down. Locals lamented that this was par for the course, just the way it is. There's a complacency with their actively decaying and destruction transit system. Do you remember a moment where everything worked? I asked in return. I received a blank stare, followed by a head shake. No, I presume. This country is a giant train wreck, a bus crashing into a ditch, or perhaps another kind of accident waiting to happen. While I hailed a taxi, it began to acid rain, and I watched as concrete began to melt as another car collided with the bus. A man with a head injury toddled up to the trash can near me, which happened to be on fire, and began to sing and undress in front of me. The flames, the hundreds of commuters, the latter of whom did not even for a moment bat an eye despite the fire, most distressingly despite the blood pouring down his cheek. 5 May 2019. I haven't been able to sleep for the last few nights inside the walls of the moldy apartment. Pipes hiccup and contort themselves. I sometimes wonder if it's the ghosts everyone likes to tell me continue to haunt the living, especially in a city like this, where its racialized geographies have created geographies of grief. The city becoming a switchboard of luminous death. Rather than a site of emancipatory politics, it's a site of anticipatory politics. The city's residents are always anticipating some form of violence or another, and are subsequently deeply on the edge and exasperated. Every street, every block, each stone and each brick forms an architecture of absence. Yet if you listen closely, you can make out the surface, the stirring of the bottomless silence that ancient anthropologist and historian Karl 1995 once wrote about. There are many burdens of the concrete, I think. and the cities are constituted by particular grievous concrete burdens. This is a passage from a poem. Recognize whose lands these are on which we stand. Ask the deer, the turtle, and the crane. Make sure the spirits of these lands are respected and treated with goodwill. The land is a being who remembers everything. After spending a month, I decided to take a sputtering train out to the west coast, stopping over a few nights in the state of Acirema, where in fact my own grandparents once lived. My grandfather, whose father was a settler from Ireland, has been enchanted by the landscape of sedimented sherbet, unparalleled geological formations punctuating vast horizons that rotate between neon and starlit skies. My grandmother, the chief of a Croatian immigrants, loved the land for its warmth. This is a landscape of loss and extraction. There are reminders everywhere of the dispossession and displacement, the taming of the frontier, or rather the harnessing of the elements, caused for its indigenous peoples. Alongside the theft of land and resources, I'm just going to reverse everything back again. The loss of lives and livelihoods, there's a historic attempt at linguistic erasure, which would have, if successful, denied the world of a powerful system of knowing, believing, and perceiving that define local modes of relationality with humans, but also most significantly between non-humans and more than humans. There are ways in which the land reflects our minds and bodies, and our bodies and minds in turn reflect the land. My mind wanders, I trance, watching the sun roll into the evening. How do we gaze upon a landscape when it returns our own gaze with such deep judgment? How do you suture the wounds of a traumatized landscape? This is not the first time I ask these questions. I have wondered these things before, in fact. I often ask myself these questions whenever I go home in Belfast. If you've ever exercised a dozen ghosts, please don't hesitate to get in touch. We are nearly finished. 7 June 2019. I tried to use the library, but it's only open 3 days a week, and from the hours of 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. 30 years earlier, the libraries were spaces of conviviality, open most days of the week, bustling with book-related activities for any age. Libraries are democratic social institutions dedicated to education, to understanding, and thus to the mission of cultivating compassion and empathy. To see their demise, the rapid defunding of these spaces leaves me with a pit in my stomach. I take another decaying bus to the other end of the city and wait for the train to the coast. I eat an avocado sandwich and wonder what illness might befall me now that I'm participating in the kind of magical thinking that pervades this society, and which would like to secretly witness its own collapse rather than reimagine what structures these failing systems. Perhaps my student loan debt interest will triple. Perhaps someone will grab my face again in an elevator in an unnamed museum and tell me that the size of my eyes, the shape of my lips, and the arch of my nose do not match my angle of iris surname. Perhaps if I had stood in this country of my birth, I'd have never, or stayed in this country of my birth, I'd never have known what it meant to feel safe, and how this is a basic human right denied to many Americans. Now in Los Angeles, in the evenings, I can only sleep a few hours. There's some kind of sadness incessantly enters the room and sits in my chest. It sounds like fury. It tastes like oil. It was the archaeologist Shannon Lee Doughty who once wrote, "Ruins from a foreign country may elicit a kind of orientalist erotics or dream nostalgia for something once familiar. But the ruins of one's own home do something quite different. They reproduce trauma." This is painfully accurate. I feel a tremendous guilt. I am like the idiot who waltzes into a dark room with a mirror and asks everyone to take a look. But the mirror is confused by its own function. The invocation of light, always the invocation of darkness. It simultaneously reflects, and projects. The present-future fragment, as the past piles before us all, a voice outside my window asks why everything in this country is garbage. 7 August 2019. They experience multiple school shootings every year. In fact, they rank number 1 across the globe for such mass shootings. Senseless violence is something I cannot grasp. In her 1940 essay, Warfare is Only an Invention, Not a Biological Necessity, Margaret Mead argued that warfare was a construct, its existence predicated on its imagined necessity. Citing societies where warfare was not a concept and thus did not exist, she attempted to navigate a predominantly Western desire for violence and conquest by hiding the occasional absence among certain societies. Shooting guns, violence, none of this is necessary. Yet they seem unable or unwilling to imagine otherwise. And thus the pattern continues. Factions develop and split between two wildly divergent ideologies that will ultimately go to war in the name of liberty, when the truth is that liberty itself is a construct, and it does not exist now in this land. And then it never will, unless a bridge in place of a wall can be built between the opposition. September 2019. A stranger remarked to me, Acirema is a modern death cult, but we all know that we've never been modern. Latour, 1993. That ought to make some people excited. And a death cult is perhaps the pinnacle of a civilization that's reached its glory at the precise moment that the Earth's announced it has had enough. Societal decay aside, there's a toxic thread running rampant through the planet's veins thanks to unbridled capitalism and settler colonialisms. I would like to ask what it means to unstitch this toxic thread, but it might be better to ask how and why we have all, collectively as humans, decided that we are complacent with the ongoing pollution of our world. Not to mention the continuous extraction and privatization of natural resources. First it was gold, then it was petrol, gas, and gems. Now it is water, a resource required for the maintenance of life. At the forefront of these battles are the control of the access to the waters of the indigenous again, who have dealt with, for longer than white settlers, with many figurations of toxicity or pollution. Parallels can be drawn between what unfolded in Standing Rock and what is again unfolding in the Mixie lands. ALET. No, that's Mexico. Coxie, even if historic circumstances that led to these moments are different, what is abundantly clear is that the water is a future artifact. Here we cannot apply the logic of commodity fetish, because to do so would be pointless and water's value cannot be measured. To allow the privatization of water will be our downfall, because once they come for the water, they will come for the air. Addendum. Since writing this, the citizens have continued to experience wave of violence against the non-white citizens, while the world more broadly has been transformed by the coronavirus. Both of these events have thrown many of the issues recorded in these fragments into bold relief, but little has been done pragmatically to grapple with these problems, to provide actual solutions. Life continues as usual. Echoes of student loan forgiveness reverberate across the same land that killed women's rights to their bodies, the landmark legislation known as Roe v. Wade. Nearly everything at this temporal juncture has become about control, and perhaps it always has been this way. Human beings are always trying to control something, hence our aspirations to live out fantasies and science fiction of time travel forward as well as backward. We would like to control history as well as the future. In fact, we often control the former, and many political regimes do through the construction of and suppression of narratives. It is the latter that we can actually attempt to control if we recognize that much of our fate is not governed by those sitting governments, but instead between and within ourselves. I do not have much left to say. This addendum is mere speculation, but speculation is necessary, and when is anthropology not a speculative practice? I have taken my mirror with me, re-entered the room where I was born, and asked, how did we wind up here? If there's a rot within my society, is there a rot within me? And if so, what can I do about it? Everyone and everything is fragmented, and each act of reassembly is kind of haunting. All this said, I would like us to be haunted by our collective past, rather than our failed, imagined futures. Dr. Thomas, a few final thoughts on this before I stick this in the post to you. Minus satire of disconnection and enforced estrangement fails when applied to the conditions of the 21st century. Partial disconnection results in the kind of unraveling or unmooring for the anthropologist, because alienation cannot and should not occur between any human being. This is unviable, unsustainable. One cannot build walls even for a second. Anthropology is a moral endeavor. The anthropologist has a moral obligation to those they encounter as well as society writ large. As a historian, I know they realize this, but it never takes precedence in the way it should have. The genre bending here, whether intentional or not, highlights the malleability of this exact discipline. You might ask yourself, but is this the act of grieving? Well, what I would argue is that this is the mournful invocation of the heart-centered ethnography. Here I'm thinking of the old text, edited by the archaeologist Kishna Suparat and colleagues, in Archaeologies of the Heart, 2020. What would it mean if we could go back in time and place empathy at the center of every ethnography, of every methodology? The portrait of the former United States is devastating, but alienating or estranging ourselves from the realities is an avoidant strategy, a disassociative act that forecloses our ability to embody and feel what's actually unfolding all around us. All the best, Rose. So that is that. I read through this and I thought it was interesting because it turns around that end and it does that kind of gut. So that's kind of all I've planned for the day. The first thing I want to say is if you found this interesting, let me know in either Discord or the comments or chat right now. And I will see if Professor Latham is up to talking to us for a little bit. The other things I want to mention is you will find in the description box down below, we have put in the donation link and we have put in a Patreon where you can come and provide us ongoing support so that we can reinvest some money into getting better equipment, particularly for Hetman because no one can hear him. With that, I'm going to close this out. We are running up until Monday. We're running up until Monday. We're going to talk about Ukraine again. Myself and Hetman, the regard to the dam disaster, and kind of setting people's expectations for the counteroffensive. And with that, I'm going to wish you all a very nice night, a good one, and stay safe.